not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all felt that one way or another.
The United States' 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945 marked the culmination of World War II in the Pacific. Not only was it the death of hundreds of thousands, but also the start of a whole new era of warfare, rendering all other bombs and weapons obsolete. Prior to the nuclear attack, the Big Three, Stalin, Churchill, and Truman, had their last World War II conference in Potsdam, Germany. Among other things, they issued the Potsdam Declaration, which called for the surrender of all Japanese armed forces. If not met, the Japanese were in store for much worse, the atomic bomb. After signing an official surrender document, Japan was demilitarized and transformed into a constitutional monarchy under U.S. supervision. Emperor Hirohito was made into a figurehead for the Japanese people, encouraging them to accept the United States' help and occupation, so that their once colonial empire would not reach its complete demise. Japan's new constitution said that it was no longer able to be an aggressor nation, although that was the least of their problems when the majority of the population was starving. In 1952, American occupation of Japan ended, and the two countries became allies in the Treaty of San Francisco.
サンフランシスコ講和条約
By the 1960s, Japan's dependence on U.S. economic aid and investments paid off, as it became the third largest economy in the world, in what was known as the Japanese post-war economic miracle. As Japan demonstrated, there was now a shift in world powers. The United States and Soviet Union quickly turned from allies to enemies as tensions over differing ideologies became too much to handle. It was a race for nuclear armaments, as the U.S. tried to enforce their containment policy to fight against the Soviet spread of communism. In 1947, President Truman explicitly stated that the U.S. would provide political, military, and economic assistance to all democratic nations under threat from external or internal authoritarian forces, aka communism, in the famous Truman Doctrine.
The free peoples of the world look to us for support in maintaining their freedoms. If we falter in our leadership, we may endanger the peace of the world, and we shall surely endanger the welfare of this nation.
Meanwhile, in China, the nationalists and communists reverted back to their original civil war after joining forces to expel the Japanese in World War II. The nationalists, otherwise known as the Kuomintang or KMT, was started by Sun Yat-sen, whose three principles of the people were nationalism, socialism, and democracy. After his death, Chiang Kai-shek succeeded him during World War II, where he received a whopping $1.5 billion from the U.S. to defeat the Japanese. The peasants soon backed Mao Zedong, leader of the communists, and gave him the majority and thus the upper hand. In 1949, the communists officially won the war and renamed China as the People's Republic of China. In February of 1950, the two communist nations, the Soviets and the Chinese, signed a friendship pact, making Americans fearful of the continued communist expansion in Asia. Communist China expanded once again to Inner Mongolia and Tibet, forcing the Dalai Lama, the Tibetans' unifying religious leader, to India. The Pancha Lama, second in rank only to the Dalai Lama, was abducted by Chinese officials at the age of 6, and still remains a controversy today by Buddhist activists. After several revolts, Tibet is still under the hands of the repressive Chinese government. All this drama led to a border dispute between China and India in 1962. The KMT, on the other hand, left mainland China for Taiwan, which was previously known as Formosa to Portuguese explorers. There they established the Republic of China and continued to get aid from the U.S. Although Taiwan's economy excelled, eventually the U.S. and the UN officially recognized the People's Republic of China as a true China in 1973. From the start, Mao followed the lead of the Soviet Union and instituted many new reforms, one being the Agrarian Land Reform Law of 1950, where he seized land from landowners to distribute to the poor. He remodeled 5-year plans of the Soviet Union and brought all industry under government control. China was producing huge amounts of cement, coal, electricity, and particularly steel by 1957. In an effort to compete with the developed West, Mao tried to implement the Great Leap Forward, which proposed the development of communes, or large collective farms. The local governments could not keep up with the astronomical production quotas, so instead they lied, leading to the famine of 30 million people. The program was discontinued in 1961, and China's production was left back at where they first started. Around this time, the Soviets withdrew technological aid from China after there were differences in leadership. The Soviets did not like the fact that China was so self-reliant in their communism, so they split. Because of the failure of the Great Leap Forward and the Sino-Soviet rift, Mao stepped back from the government for a while. When seeing that the new government was leaning towards capitalism, Mao implemented the Red Guards, using high school and college students to wreak havoc and continue the Cultural Revolution towards a true Marxist state. The goal of the Cultural Revolution was to shut down any intellectual or creative threat, in an effort to avoid a westernized, privileged upper class. Schools were closed, Mao's political rivals were openly mocked, and anyone who was against the revolution was exiled to labor camps, jailed, or executed. Doctors, lawyers, teachers, and musicians were all sent to be culturally retrained at collective farms. The revolution threatened the welfare of the Chinese nation, and after Mao's death in 1976, Deng Xiaoping, the premier of China, turned things around. Korea was yet another proxy war in the Grand Soviet versus United States fight. Because Korea was annexed by Japan during the Second World War, it was originally supposed to be an independent nation after the defeat of Japan. However, it was too unstable to be left on its own, so the two world superpowers intervened and set up two separate governments. Although both troops were withdrawn in 1949, on June 25, 1950, the Communist North Koreans crossed the 38th parallel into US-backed South Korea. South Korea did not have the means to defend themselves, so they requested the help of the United Nations. UN troops, mainly consisting of US and British forces, helped push back North Korean forces under the direction of General MacArthur. North Korea looked like it was about to give up, but the Chinese came in to save their day as UN forces came a little too close for China's liking. Finally, in 1953, the two sides signed a ceasefire, marking the 38th parallel as the divide between both demilitarized nations. The U.S. had a major fear that the fall of one Southeast Asian nation to communism would cause all neighboring countries to follow the same path. This theory, first acknowledged by President Eisenhower, is known as the domino theory. The U.S. was afraid that if the whole of Korea turned communist, their ally Japan would also soon follow suit. The Cold War eventually eased down as the United States took in a new policy of détente, or cooling Cold War hostilities, in place of brinkmanship. This spirit started during President Nixon's visit to the People's Republic of China in 1972. The United States and Soviet Union tried to peacefully coexist instead of committing nuclear worldwide suicide, largely in part to the Sino-Soviet rift. This policy ended when President Reagan, a fierce anti-communist, came to office. The Cold War affected all corners of the globe, with new technological achievements and warfare. It also removed any obstacles for true globalization, as the age of the internet connected all financial networks. After China normalized trading with the US, China has become an economic and industrial powerhouse. Deng Xiaoping allowed for the construction of a democracy wall, although it eventually got torn down due to the spread of anti-communist ideals. He also implemented the four modernizations to fix their economy through agriculture, military, industry, and technology. Although their economy has been rapidly booming due to free market capitalism, their political reforms still need work. This is clearly evident through the Tiananmen Square massacre, where Chinese troops killed as many as thousands of civilian protesters on June 4, 1989. Throughout this Cold War era, there were hostilities and new alliances. It brought along advancements in technology, a more polluted environment, as well as political repression. All of these events have marked the face of Asia's future and where it stands today.